Greetings, and thank you for tuning in once again. Today we are going to talk about a very important issue that is the unjust, unfair, and barbaric persecution of the so-called sex offender, and how this is affecting all of us, even our children. This message will go out to everyone. Regardless of whether or not you're an offender, current offender, an ex-offender, if you're related to an offender in any way, if you're a parent, a family member, an employer, a pastor, anybody who has any interest or concern or questions about the whole sex offender issue. This is for those who are just totally biased and totally anti-sex offender and like to be or prefer to be judgmental towards these people. So this is for all of you, and you can all learn something from this. So please pay attention. Okay, first let's start out with those who want to judge other people, who want to judge sex offenders, who are really anti-sex offender and think they're the most worst, terrible people on the planet and all this stuff. First of all, shame on you, because most of you, the truth is, most of you don't really even know the truth and facts about sex offenders or sex offenses. You know very little, most of you. Some of you may have various reasons that you want to judge these people, whether it's something that happened in your own experience, in your own life, or maybe you just want to belong to something, you wanted to jump on the bandwagon to belong to something you thought was a good thing, a sense of belonging. Maybe you're seeking attention. Maybe you actually thought that you're doing the right thing and judging these people because it was the right thing to do, because everybody else was doing it, it seemed like, when you really didn't know the truth and the facts. And a lot of people don't. This is the truth. They don't even know what they're talking about when they make these judgments. So for those people, what I'd like you to do is go to my video. It's called Sex Offender, The Truth and Facts. Parentheses, exposing the lies, myths, and rumors. I'd just like you to tune into that. It's, I think, about 45 minutes or something. Watch it. What we're doing is giving you examples of many of the common lies, myths, and rumors that you hear in the media, that you hear from other people, maybe that you even concoct in your own mind, that you come up with that really just aren't even true. And we covered most of the common ones, and we give you the truth and facts, and show you the other side that you may not know. So tune into that. You might be very, very surprised. You might learn something that what you thought wasn't necessarily true. Also, here's another good one: the sex offender witch hunt. I want you to watch that one. It's about the same length, I think, maybe a little less. Excellent video. This talks about, actually, for the last 4 decades, that's about 40 years now, how the witch hunt against sex offenders actually began, where it began, when it started, how it developed, and what it's doing to us now. This is very, very important, including, we're going to talk about that today as well, how all this is affecting all of us, our whole society as a whole, and especially our children. Very important. Recently we had a 16-year-old boy who was did really nothing than a kind of a normal childhood thing, was to send his 16-year-old consensual girlfriend a nude picture, and the picture wasn't even, you couldn't even tell what it was, and his principal and the local police, this was in Naperville, Illinois. His name was Corey Walgren, and so when they threatened him with this being a sex offender and labeling him with this terrible stigma, and threatening him with having to register as a sex offender and all that. And he turns around, 16-year-old child turns around and jumps off a 6-story building and kills himself. Not because of what he did. He was an innocent child. He really didn't break any laws. He didn't do anything wrong. And he was just being a kid and trying to grow up. And he killed himself because of that, because of the stigma behind all of this, behind the witch hunt, the stigma that the media gives all of us, about these issues that are always not always the truth. A lot of them are lies and rumors. They're not factual, but this is what we believe, things we learn from each other that aren't true. And because of the registry is an insane law. A lot of the states now are looking at getting rid of this law for a number of reasons. And but this is why this boy killed himself, because of just all this chaos surrounding the stigma behind all this. It wasn't because of what he did. So here we have a very sad case of a 16-year-old child killing himself over this ridiculous issue that's been going on for so long. And why it needs to stop. We need to stop this, at least for our children's sake. And it's not doing any of us any good, but especially for our kids. So please watch that. That'll be a very important issue. If you want to learn more about the boy, I have another video. It's called the Sex Offender Label Stigma and the Registry is Killing Our Children, including this 16-year-old boy. And it'll tell you more about Corey and how that happened and why we need to stop this insane thing that we've been living under, which is basically a lot of irrational and dysfunctional so-called sex offense laws that have been created behind all these myths, lies, and rumors, and how that's affecting all of us. So anyway, if you're one of that group, I understand there's, again, shame on you. Get the truth and facts before you judge people. But second of all, don't feel bad, because there's thousands and thousands of people just like you out there under the same situation. It's understandable. This is what people do. Oftentimes we don't. We judge before we do, whether it's somebody's race or their sexual identity or their culture, their religion, or whatever it is. We judge people and we don't know really anything about them. We don't know about their lives or anything. And we don't have the truth and we don't have the facts, but yeah, we want to judge people. And so it's a kind of a common thing, so don't feel bad. But what we want you to do is really study and get those truth and facts. And and you may see things in a different light, and that's what we're hoping for. So now, if you're an offender that is watching in today, or let's say more of a kind of a recent case, you're probably just now finding out and getting a pretty good insight that you have a whole lifetime of chaos and problems ahead of you because of this sex offender stigma that goes on with the label and so on of sex offender. And not just yourselves, but a lot of you may have found out now your family's already been affected. Maybe your own children have been affected by this. And you're just starting to wonder, my God, what's going on? And this is crazy. And we're going to talk about what we hope to do about this, what we can do about this, and you can take part in that. If you're an offender and you've been around for a while, and you've been dealing with this for a while, you already know. You probably know all about the problems and stuff that we've had to deal with, and our families have had to deal with because of this sex offender witch hunt and the label and the stigma. Not just us, but our families, maybe your own children. You know what we're talking about. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to break some of that down today for those of you who really don't know. We're going to look at this big, huge, wide, chaotic picture of what a sex offender has to deal with, about the persecution that they actually go through, which is just insane. It's barbaric, it's irrational, and we're going to show you a lot of that today. So again, people that have you people who have been around for a while, you've experienced this. We're going to talk about what we can do about this. Okay, maybe you're related. You're listening. You're related to somebody. It's your own family member. Maybe your own son. Maybe your wife or your husband. Maybe you're someone's employer. You're an offender's pastor at a church. Anything, a relative, whatever that you're interested in. You've seen some of this chaos, and you go on with this person now in your life, and maybe it's affected you and or your family, and you want to reach out to someone. We're going to talk about that because we have some good news. In the past, there hasn't been a whole lot of ways to reach out to people and to get help with these situations, and now we're kind of obtaining that finally. And so we're going to talk about that. And so where people can go and get support and get help and so on. So very important. Please watch as we go through this video. Okay, so as most of us know, in our so-called justice criminal system, which is oftentimes more like an unjustice criminal system, most all crimes and all offenses, people, you get charged, you do your small jail sentence usually, you might have a little bit of supervision or something afterwards, but not usually very long, and that's it. That's all that entails, and it's dropped, and you have a record. Usually you can have that usually erased after a while, and so on, if you stay out of trouble and all that, but not so with the sex offender. Not so with with anything that's labeled as a sex offense. It's totally the opposite. Basically, as many of you probably know, listening to this, basically your whole life and your whole family's life is completely ruined. Is ruined for a lifetime. You're subjected to ongoing, never-ending punishment, and it increases and increases and increases as your life goes along. It doesn't get better; it just gets worse and worse and worse. After you've already done your time, you've served your sentence, maybe you've done a reasonable amount of supervision. It doesn't matter. Now it's going to continue on and on and on for the rest of your life. Which of course is totally irrational, is totally wrong. And this does not mean by any means that most people who are charged with sex offenses are any worse or any more dangerous or anything than anyone else who commits a lot of crimes. Sure, there's some minor crimes that really don't harm people or whatever. And anyway, but there's a lot worse out there. There are many crimes, many offenses that are just as equally, if not more so, more dangerous or more violent or more of a risk in our society than the average person who's charged with a sex offense. Many people these days, the majority of people charged with offenses these days are probably due to looking at illegal pornography, which they found somewhere on the internet. And then there are some with like hands-on cases or such involving children in different things. There's a multitude of different types of offenses, but these people are not any worse than somebody who physically assaults you, somebody who stabs you, somebody who shoots you, somebody who breaks into your home and attacks you at night while you're sleeping, somebody who sells your kids drugs and maybe even kills your child with drugs. someone who drives drunk or intoxicated and kills somebody, someone who murders someone, murders even don't go through what a sex offender goes through. They serve a sentence, that's it, and that's it. Again, we've kind of lost the picture. We've become so focused on this sex offender thing so much that's all our mind sees, and we forget that there's so many other offenses and so many criminals and such out there that we're surrounded by. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are, because we're not tracking them like we do these sex offense cases. And they don't have to register, and they don't have to go through counseling, and they don't have lifetime probation or public registry where you know where they're at and all that. None of these people, even murderers, have to go through this. So we don't know what they're doing out there. We don't know who they are, what they're doing, where they are. But with a sex offender, it's their life is over. There's no privacy. Everybody knows where they are, what they're doing exactly, their whole life, their whole history. Their whole family gets involved, their children get involved, their innocent children, their innocent spouses, their family members somehow all get involved in this, and everybody's lives get ruined. And this doesn't happen to any other group, a criminal group, at all. Even though, again, there's so many out there who are probably even more dangerous. Somebody who looks at pornography on the internet is not really classified as being dangerous. And it's actually not considered a violent crime because it isn't. There's no proof that looking at that is going to make someone go out and rape somebody either. So most people, that's it for them. They look at it and they're done, and that's it. But yet, all sex offenses, regardless of what they are, whether it's a minor offense or major offense, they're all grouped together as this one big group of mass dangerous, extremely dangerous, terrible convicts, that all get the same treatment. They all get the same treatment regardless of what they did, and no other group, all these other dangerous and violent groups, that's it. They do their time, that's it, and they're not going through any of this. So the sex offender is a targeted group. They're very targeted. They're isolated. This is a group that has gone through everything. Everything, any kind of vigilante attacks, you had houses burnt down, just harassment, your neighborhood, ran out of neighborhood, just kicked out of their churches, losing their families, separated from their families, separated from their children. These people have even been murdered, and their murderers could get away with it. One of them did. Actually, a person murdered an offender, wasn't even charged with a crime, and that's how ridiculous and out of control this has gotten. And again, this ends up affecting not just them for their lifetime, but their innocent family. This is affecting innocent people. It affects their family, their own children. They can get bothered in school. So many different things, because it's just there's no privacy for these people. It's just their whole life is just out there, and then the rest of the family, an innocent family who have done nothing, they get punished as well, and that's totally wrong. I'm sure all of you would agree with that. And the reason that has happened, that this has happened with this group and not any other group, is as throughout history, witch hunts develop against different people, and again, that can be towards sexual orientation, towards a race, towards a color, towards your skin color, towards your religion, a certain cultural preference. Many things these witch hunts have developed against people, and they come and go. Eventually, witch hunts do dissipate, and if you go back to the 1700s of the witch hunts that were supposedly practicing witchcraft and all that. Well, that was all never true, and that went on for about 4 decades, about the same length we're at now with the sex offender witch hunt. And, of course, many innocent men, women, and children were killed, assumed to be these witches. And the only thing that finally ended that was that people came to their senses. They started thinking rationally and realized that what they were doing is wrong, that they had no facts, they had no proof, that they were just following the leader. Also, they were afraid of... many people were afraid of being accused themselves, and that's where the problem came in. Nobody was really afraid of the witches, maybe a few, but nobody really believed it, nobody thought, but the stigma was so powerful, and people were getting murdered because of it. People were afraid, and they didn't want anything to do with them. They shunned them. Even their own family members probably stayed away from them. And because they didn't want to get accused, and if you got associated with them, or you helped one of them, or maybe stood up for one of their rights or something, or maybe questioned their accusations, you could be suspected, and then you had the stigma because they thought you maybe were involved or were doing the same things. And the same thing happens with the sex offender witch hunt. Is people in general really aren't afraid of sex offenders. They're not walking around all afraid of sex offenders, what they might do and all that. Very, very few people. What the society is afraid of is that stigma. They're afraid because of the stigma that has developed around the sex offense thing. Nobody wants anything to do with it. People are afraid to rent to them. They're afraid to give them jobs. They're afraid to even stick up for them, to question anything about them, because next thing, somebody's going to suspect them, or somebody's going to be angry because they rented to them or because they gave them a job. And again, we're talking about people, probably a majority of people that don't even know anything about what they're talking about. They really have no truth and facts to base what their judgment on. But we have the same situation, and this is how witch hunts develop. It's not because they're actually afraid of what they think they're saying that is the problem. You know, they're afraid of being involved. They're thinking of people thinking that they're involved and getting accused themselves, and getting wrapped up and involved in it. That's what people get afraid of, and that's the same thing with a sex offender that we see all these years and we see today. That's why sex offenders struggle out there, because there's so much, thanks to people like the media, who's notorious for lies and rumors and stuff, as we know anyway, that we hear things from them, we hear things from hearsay. And next thing, that's kind of what we think about them. We don't want any part of that. We don't want people to think that we're one of them, or, you know, we're involved in it or something. So we have to shun them. We have to go against them automatically. And this is kind of what happens. And you can see how it develops. It's kind of an understandable thing, but it doesn't make it right. You know, witch hunts are totally wrong. And that's why they do dissipate, as people finally come to the irrational thinking. So anyway, sex and sexuality and all is kind of a private thing, and it can be a touchy subject, and so it kind of made a good place to land a witch hunt, and somewhere along the lines, people decide, well, this is where we're going to point fingers, and this is going to be the scapegoat for any number of reasons. People can latch on to something like that and start accusing other people and joining with other people against this group of people, because for a number of reasons that they will do this, and out of that becomes a witch hunt. And the sex offender was, back in the 70s, when this all started, was the logical place place for people to go. And again, if you watch the video, the sex offender witch hunt, it'll tell you how that exactly unfolded, and where it started, and how it turned into what it is today, which is not what it was meant to be. And so that's how it developed. And so the sex offender is basically our latest scapegoat. That's where we point fingers, you know, for a lot of different reasons in our lives. We want to be judgmental, be biased against someone. That's where we go. And of course, somebody's going to get the bad end of that, and of course, and that's these people that have any kind of a so-called sex offense, then they're going to get the blunt of this, and of course they have, and it's become what might have originally was intended to protect or to help people. Of course, escalated into something it wasn't meant to be, and has ruined the lives of a lot of people. A lot of families, even a lot of our children, just like Corey, the 16-year-old boy who committed suicide over this. And he's not the only one, I can guarantee you that. So this is harming our children. And so what was supposed to be protecting our children possibly in the beginning is now harming. So what that means is we've done things in the wrong way. And we're going to talk about that. So we've done things in the wrong way that is not working anymore, and we need to change it, and that's what we're going to talk about doing. But first, we're going to discuss this part of it. Is the extremes, the irrational laws that we are at today, all the extreme sentencing, extremes in the justice system. That are not, that are totally unfair. Some of them are illegal, and this is really unfair, really unjust for anyone and their families and related to them who have been labeled as a sex offender. And so we're just going to kind of run through that list. It's such a huge, enormous list. It could take a long time just to sit down and explain it all, but we're just going to kind of run through it briefly so you get an idea of the impact and the picture of this just enormous picture of what the persecution of the sex offender is, and how what they and their families have to go through. Because a lot of you don't really realize that, so we're going to talk about that. Okay, so first of all, some of the sentencing extremes. We have some of the longest, most extreme sentencing ever heard of with sex offenses. Some people who have even just looked at illegal pornography on the internet have got more time than a murder, which is insane. Very unreasonable and unfair sentencing. Terms of supervision. They can have up to lifetime supervision. They never get off it. It's their whole life. Nobody gets that, even a murder. You have to register. All offenders, regardless of what they did or what their case is, they have to have registration. That means they're publicly registered. People know who they are and where they live and where they and everything about them. And so they're unprotected. They're unprotected. Their family is unprotected. Their children are unprotected. They have absolutely no privacy, and it makes it a lot harder for them to find work, to find places to live, and so on. Again, a lot of states are looking at abolishing registration because it's been pretty senseless. It's not doing any good. It doesn't prove any there's stopping or anything. And it's very costly. It's costing our taxpayers millions of dollars to keep this up. So I think eventually we're going to see this registration system dissipate because it's pretty worthless. So that's another one. Okay, they can't vote. They lose their right to vote. They lose their right to own weapons. They can't own any type of guns or anything. They are very restricted to where they can work. They're restricted to where they can live. They are okay. They have they're forced to go through some very extensive counseling. That can be actually helpful and useful, but sometimes very extensive. It's very expensive. And they're required to go through it. They have no choice. No other criminal group has mandatory forced counseling. Along with this counseling is polygraphs. These sex offenders are forced to take polygraphs. That basically is illegal. It forces them to go against the constitutional Fifth Amendment. which is the right not to incriminate yourself, the right to remain silent. These people are forced to divulge every single bit of their private life from their childhood on up, and everything that they're doing, and everything about their sex life and intimate life and everything else to therapists, and to be tested under the use of these forced polygraphs to see that they've divulged everything about their life and that they're not doing anything wrong. So again, basically an illegal thing. They're forced to do it. If they don't, they can send them back to prison. That's the threat, and that forces them to continue to do that. Okay, a lot of times they're forced to take what is called a penile plethysmograph. This is a electronic device, kind of similar to a lie detector in a way, that was originated in the 1940s to detect and to keep gays out of the military. Well, somebody picked it up. I won't mention the name, but a person picked it up, and some psychologist in the all around the 60s, 70s, and decided to use it on sex offenders as this witch hunt kind of thing was just getting going. And basically it's attached to the genitals of either a male or a female offender, and it measures arousal. And so these people are forced to look at pictures of naked people, nude people, pictures of sex, including children. Now, these people have just been arrested for something maybe involving children, but now they're forcing them to look at pictures of naked children, sometimes sex with children, even child pornography. Even when they've just got arrested for it and they're told to stay away from it, they're going to show it to them. And then they have to listen to these audio tapes, these recordings of rape, of women, rape of even children, to see if they get aroused to it. And then this machine that's attached to their genitals measure this arousal, and supposedly that's how they determine whether they get aroused or not to these things. Well, it's all wrong. It's totally invasive. It's been in and out of the courts. It's been proven to be mentally and physically invasive, privacy invasive, ineffective. It's inaccurate, just like polygraphs. Polygraphs, that's why they can't be used in court as evidence. They're oftentimes not accurate. Same with these plethysmographs. They're oftentimes not accurate. And very expensive test again, so it's again a waste of money. The courts have ruled it really has no scientific use. There's no evidence it has really any true scientific use. So I think a lot of people are looking at preventing the use, and it should be banned because of the nature of it. It's something that should be banned anyway. So the treatment alone is just such an impactful thing for anyone who has to divulge their whole private life like that. And it can be very expensive. Sometimes if you can't afford it, you can be sent back to jail. Sometimes, as extensive and confusing as it can be, even if you don't understand it, you can be sent back to jail. A number of things really that are questionable about the treatment. But again, it can be a useful thing, and it can be helpful. Of course, prison life for sex offenders, they can get some extremely long sentences, as mentioned. But they're considered, again, because of the stigma, they're considered to be the lowest of the low in prisons. Nobody wants anything to do with them. So they can be harassed there, bothered, extorted, even murdered, again, or many of them have committed suicide over all the stress and the problems that has been created for them in their lives because of all the stigma and the pressure and so on for themselves and their families. I don't think we can mention all the restrictions are so enormous for sex offenders, not just where they can live and where they can work, what kind of work they can do, the type of entertainment, they can go to, the type of places they can go, the amount of travel they can do, the use of any moderate alcohol, or use, what they can consume, what they can read, what they can read, what they can watch on TV, what they can is just so everything is just so much extreme restrictions. They're so limited. It's very, very difficult to live even any sort of a normal life at all for most of these people, and therefore a lot of them, because of this, a lot of them end up violating these rules. They're so extensive, no matter how hard some of them try, it's just so easy to violate something. They end up with a violation anyway, and they end up going back to jail for that. So let's see, they're also subjected to urine tests for drugs and alcohol, which is, of course, very privacy invading. Is done while somebody's standing there watching you urinate. They're subjected to strip searches, meaning they have to completely take off all their clothes in front of somebody else while they sit there, watch them do it, and show their private parts and everything, which, of course, is, again, very, very embarrassing, humiliating, and privacy invasive. Let's see, through treatment, it's what's called sex offender treatment or counseling. Their thoughts, every single thought, their feelings, their actions are monitored 24/7. They have to log everything they do. Basically write everything down, go through some very extensive, heavily emotionally draining situations, or writing about their whole history in their childhood and their life. And this can be a very draining, very stressful, and depressing situation for many of them. Many offenders are forced to wear what's called GPS tracking bands on their arms or their legs, and usually they're usually noticeable, even though you got them under your clothes. People know you got them there. Again, it can be very humiliating, very embarrassing, and wherever you go, people see that, and basically they're being tracked everywhere they go. They're being tracked like wild animals, and that's wrong. Many of them end up homeless. So a lot of offenders, nobody wants to rent to them because of all the stigma. Doesn't mean they're bad people or dangerous people. They can be very valuable people, worthwhile, important people even, but because of the stigma, they can't get a place to live. They end up homeless, and adding to that problem. And of course, it doesn't help them get back on their feet or take care of their families and resituate in the community at all. Same with getting work. Very difficult to find work for many offenders. And if you can't work, you can't support yourself or your family. Many offenders are separated from their own families, their own children, for oftentimes no really valid reason, which is very bad for not just them, but their families and their children. It's a horrible thing. Let's see, offenders are often told who they can be around, who they can't be around, who they can and cannot have a relationship with. They are restricted from most internet use. They are restricted from most social website use. They are often restricted from social activities in the church. Many offenders have been subjected to illegal activities, even in the legal system. They've been subjected to lies and false statements about themselves and their actions from prosecuting attorneys, even their own attorneys. It's difficult to even find attorneys that will want to represent these people because of the stigma involved. They have experienced lies from sometimes even their judges, their judges in the courtroom, from their parole or probation officers. Many people have lied and against these people and have said things that were never even true, and they end up in their courtroom documents. And oftentimes it's almost impossible to get these statements corrected and changed. So they oftentimes go through a whole lifetime with these false statements about themselves. Very few people will stick their neck out to try to really help or assist these people that are labeled with this sex offender stigma. Recently, even passports are now labeled with these people's private and personal information, stamped with their sex offender information when they travel, so that everybody knows their private life. All offenders are labeled with this leveling system, level 1, 2, 3, a supposed risk level assessment, which contains 10 very ridiculous questions that are basically blanket statements or questions that they apply to a large group, to the majority of them, instead of on separate cases or by each case, which of course never works. And oftentimes they're inaccurate, and they can result in further public notification, and again, more humiliation, more risk of problems for their families and children. There are many offenders locked up indefinitely, sometimes for life, under something called civil commitment, which is often only based on something that they might do, and usually a very unfair judgment, and instead of based on something that they actually did, as it's only someone's perception of what they might do, and they lock these people up indefinitely with no date of release. There's a major difference in the sentences oftentimes between state and federal. You can commit the same offense in a state and have maybe get 90 days for it. You can commit the same offense under federal guidelines and get 5 years for it. So these federal guidelines for the same crime can be almost 10 times as long, which is ridiculous. There should be no difference. We're all in the same country, or else we should be charged under sex offense or under state offense, on state regulations. Oftentimes, the federal guidelines are only based on crossing a state line, even though you still committed a state offense. Now they consider it federal, and you're charged under the federal guidelines. That's something else that needs to be changed. And of course, one really sad thing, as we know, like with Corey and other children, we have many children in our country who are being charged with sex offenses now, and have been for a while. One most ridiculous case was a 6-year-old boy who they wanted to charge as a sex offender because he pinched his female classmate on the buttocks, which is pretty normal childhood play, had nothing to do with sex at all. And they were going to make this 6-year-old boy a sex offender. That's how extreme this has gotten. Also, as most of us know, normal childhood sexual experimentation or learning experiences, as we've experienced with other children and such, as most children growing up do, now can be misconstrued and called as sex offenses. And even with our kids' normal activities. and experimentation. And now they can be charged as sex offenders, which of course have, the children know about this. They hear it from all sources through the media and other peers and so on. You got your children scared in this country. You have the parents scared for their children. The parents are scared. Half the parents are scared. They're going to be charged with something or for saying the wrong thing to their kids or teach them sex education or any normal thing nowadays. So now we have to be so careful of what we say and do that it's affecting all of us in a very, very bad way, and especially our children, because they're not old enough. They don't know how to comprehend all this. If we're locking them up and charging them with sex offenses for the rest of their life because of some normal childhood sex play, we know we're in trouble. We're in very, very bad situation in this country with these the extremes of these so-called sex offense laws that we're all now living under. So this, of course, is something we definitely need to change in our country. We can't be charging our children with these crimes that aren't probably even crimes, and charging our children with so-called sex offenses. We can see what that's done to the kids like Corey in Illinois, and to a lot of our children. This is killing them. They're afraid, and they're taking this fear and going out and killing themselves. And that's totally unfair to our kids. So we have to protect them now. We need laws to protect our children from these irrational, insane sex offense laws that we're living under. That's now not protecting them, but it's harming them. So we actually have to protect our children against these things now. And we need to make a lot of changes in these irrational laws. So that's a lot of it. That's not all of it. Believe it or not, I think you've heard a lot, but I hope. And I hope you're shocked. You should be. That's not everything. I don't have time to... I would be making this video for 5 or 6 hours to hit and explain all the details of all these things to you and everything that's involved, and that's only really part of it. But hopefully you get the picture here. I think most of you listening to this realize the extensive, chaotic, barbaric craziness of where all these sex offender extremes have gotten to, and where the witch hunt against sex offenders has led us. So I'm going to have to cut this off here, or else we're going to have an extremely long video. And I need to cut it short. So that's kind of a ballpark. Hopefully you've gotten the message, whatever your situation is. If you've been sort of an anti-sex offender, maybe you've been... you learn some things, maybe you decide to change your mind. You see this is wrong. You see this is wrong for all of us. And how it's affecting our society as a whole. You may want to take part in trying to make changes. If you're a sex offender, a past offender, you're a family member related to someone who is, whoever, same thing. You might want to do that, and we're going to talk about that. There are, thankfully for all of us, there are some many advocacy groups around the country who are working to change these laws, and they're making a lot of progress, but it's rather slow. What we do need is more people to get involved, and we don't need to be afraid to do that. There's nothing going to happen. So we need to not be afraid. We need to be not fearful to participate in doing our part in making these changes. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can do it by yourself, by writing your senators, your lawmakers, your Congress, your governors about these issues, and express how you feel, and express the changes that we need to make, and the eradication in a lot of these irrational laws that we're living under. And you'll be backed up. You're not alone. And you can join one of the many groups. I'm going to give you 2 main groups out there. You can start a group. Now many groups support groups are forming around the country. and they're for offenders and their family members and so on, anyone who's interested in these issues and making changes. So there's one group, his name is CURE, it's CURE, so Citizens for Rehabilitation of Errants, I think. You'll find them on the internet. They have a website. You can join these people. They have newsletters that keep you informed of laws that they're changing and laws that they have changed and their progress. And you can join these people and talk to them. They have support and so on. Another group is called NARSOL. That's NARSOL, which is the National Association for the Reform of Rational Sex Offender Laws. And also they have a website, a newsletter, and they have support groups starting. They're called fearless groups, I think. They're starting around all parts of the country, or you can start one. They can tell you how to do it, so if you get in contact with them. And support groups, they have blogs, different things that you can find support from other people and other families in the same situation, what other people are doing to help. And if you get these groups going, start them or join one that's already out there, the more people that we have on these issues to address them to again to Congress and our lawmakers and so on, the bigger the difference we can make. So this is what we need. There's power in numbers, obviously. So the more people we have, the faster we can get things done, the more we can get things done. We need to start challenging these crazy laws that are affecting all of us, basically destroying our whole nation in a lot of ways, and of course harming our children, even causing our children to commit suicide. So this has gotten out of control and needs to stop, and we need to stop it. We're the ones who can stop it. So do your part. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Do your part. Step out and do whatever you can. Even if you want to make phone calls, you write letters, get a group going, join a group. And there's support groups. There are support groups. People get together, and you can talk about these issues and get help from each other and ideas on what we can do to protect our kids and so on, and ourselves. So I hope you do that. That was NARSOL and CURE, the two main groups, and I hope you make a decision to join us, and together we can make a difference. And there's other ways too. There's many ways to get involved, but make a video, get on YouTube, and get on these the other social websites, and make a video like this. Tell people, tell the public and society how you think and feel about this, and how we need to change it. Maybe your personal experiences, whatever. That's another way that you can get directly involved. One last thing, if you look at the last several decades, we have a big decline in all the good things in our country, all our foundations, like marriage and births and our social system and so on is all falling apart, especially with our kids. And a lot of this is being caused by all this sex stuff and sexual harassment issues and kind of all this witch hunt kind of a thing. The children are picking up on all this, and it's affecting them in bad ways. They're going to grow up hearing all this stuff, all this negativity and these issues about. They're going to end up with, when they grow up, with a lot of social problems, relationship problems, sexual problems. That's what's going to happen. It's already happening. And, at the same time we're having that decline in all the good foundations, we're having a rise, we're having a incline in all the bad stuff and all the violence, sexual violence, and decline in increase and like all this little illegal pornography stuff and a lot of kidnapping has increased, and even murder, even of our children, and And so all this negative stuff, all these divorce and child support and all this stuff, abortions and all, it's all going in the wrong direction. We're losing all our strong foundations of our country, and it's all going downhill. And a lot of it has been caused in the last few decades. This is what we're seeing because of all this witch hunt, sex offender, extreme stuff that we've been doing out there, and it's just got our whole families and our whole culture totally messed up, and we need to get in there and straighten it out. So I will stop right here. Again, I could spend hours talking about this and going into detail, but we don't have time. And hopefully you've learned something. We've educated you a little bit in some of these areas. Hopefully you see where the problem is, and hopefully you'll join us and take part in fighting this and getting this chaotic, barbaric situation under control. And we have to stop this witch hunt stuff. We have to get that. We have to dissipate the witch hunt. We have to get a lot of these laws challenged, a lot of them changed, and so they're safer for all of us and all of our kids, and get back on the right track with this. And so hopefully, again, I hope that you'll all take part and do your part in many different ways. And good luck, and may God bless us all.